Blood is life. Blood is oxygen. Without blood, we'll be dead. If our blood is poisoned, we're going to die. Blood. It's very important to us. So that blood symbolizes life. And so this woman, and we're giving a picture here, sort of a symbolic image of an individual whose life was just slowly draining out of her. It's not like she had some kind of traumatic injury where her arm or her leg was cut off and she was going to bleed out in 5 minutes. No, this lady, her body was creating blood and losing blood and losing blood and creating blood. She was slowly passing away. Interesting, huh? The situation of most of our lives. But now we look at them. I mean, this is especially for believers, you know, especially for believers, because we have sort of embraced and seemingly believed a particular theology that doesn't seem to be working in our lives, because it seems that some of the most discouraged people that I have ever met are folks in the church. And it's very interesting. You know, I was talking to my son the other day, who's going to be a senior. I always say this, I hope he doesn't mind. A senior at the University of Cincinnati. And every so often I go visit him, and I went to visit him yesterday just to talk to him. And I had an interesting discussion. You know, I talk a lot to my children, but I had an interesting discussion with him, and I'm going to sort of share with you today a piece of it, something I wanted him to understand. Is that oftentimes in the church, especially as ministers, we minister these messages how everybody's messed up, everybody's jacked up, everybody's got issues going on that are depressing them, blah, blah, blah. Oftentimes, we sort of throw that out there to sort of justify the negativities in our own lives, okay? But what I'm suggesting today is no, I was at a retirement of an individual recently who retired young, mid-50s, financially very well off. And I know this individual very well, and he doesn't have a lot of sufferings in a lot of areas in his life. And I just even over the past couple of weeks have really been thinking and contemplating this, that many of the sufferings, many of the things that we are going through that have caused the distress in our lives are self-inflicted. Like for most of us, they're money situations. But if we look back over the course of our life, we see all kinds of things where we've wasted money and blown money and not done the right things with our money. Or maybe had gainful employment but didn't show up for work and didn't do right and maybe had a bad record and then were passed over. Or just whatever. Think about it. A lot of the issues in our lives are financial. A lot of the situations we have created because of decisions that we have made. To me, it didn't diminish the love that God has for us, but there are consequences to our choices. You do reap what you sow. A lot of the situations our children are going through. We discussed in the last program about the altars in the house of Gideon, that before Gideon could even be what God had called him to be, he had to destroy the heathen altars in his father's house, the influences that he received in the house that he grew up with. Now, his father was a child of Israel. His father was a worshiper of God. But there were influences in his father's house, even as a believer, you know, in that day, even as a believer, a worshiper of God, there were influences in that father's house that were anti-God, that were heathen altars that had a negative effect on Gideon's life, so much so to the point that he didn't even know who he was in the eyes of God and what it was that God had expected him to do, to be, and to do. So what I'm suggesting today is that we have to recognize that even a lot of the issues and ills that our children have, even from families of believers, have been influences, negative influences, that were appropriated by that individual in the house that they grew up in. We reap what we sow, even in the lives of our children. Okay? And so what I'm suggesting today, most of the ills, most of the issues that we find ourselves suffering through are a result of choices that we've made. So if we can somehow get find our way to a place where we're making wise choices, we'll find ourselves suffering a lot less. So if you do reap what you sow, and we're not sowing negativity, we're going to be reaping positive things. But we struggle so much, especially in the church, because we spend our time putting up an image. We spend our time putting up a mask before our fellow parishioners that we are something that we are not. Because we're having a very difficult time living up to the expectation that we have expressed, our church has expressed, or our pastor, our religion has expressed that a true believer must live up to. And so we fail. Our families know we're failing. Our loved ones know we're failing. But we put a mask up so nobody can tell.